The mop bucket rolled sideways as Flight 227 banked hard to the left, spilling gray water across the galley floor. Maria Vasquez steadied herself against the beverage cart, her weathered hands finding purchase with practiced ease. 23 years of cleaning commercial aircraft, and she'd never felt turbulence like this. Through the service window, she could see passengers gripping their armrests, some praying, others filming with their phones despite the flight attendants' frantic gestures to remain seated. Then came the announcement that would change everything. "This is your captain speaking. We have a medical emergency in the cockpit. If there is anyone on board with flight experience, any experience at all, please identify yourself to the crew immediately." The words hung in the recycled air like a challenge. Maria's fingers tightened around the mop handle. The Timex watch on her wrist, the one she'd worn for 15 years, ticked past 14:47. She knew that time would matter later, when investigators would piece together what happened in the next 37 minutes over the Arizona desert. The lead flight attendant, Catherine, rushed past the galley, her usually perfect composure cracking. "Both pilots," she whispered to another crew member. "Food poisoning from the crew meal. The first officer just collapsed." Maria set down her mop. The motion was deliberate, careful, like someone handling live ordnance, which, in a way, she was. "Catherine," she called out, her voice cutting through the cabin noise with unexpected authority. The flight attendant turned, confused. Maria Vasquez was reliable, quiet, invisible, the kind of person who kept planes clean between flights without anyone really noticing. "Maria, not now. I can fly this aircraft." The words landed like a thunderclap. Catherine's expression shifted from confusion to skepticism. "Maria, this isn't." Boeing 737-800. Maximum takeoff weight 174,200 pounds. Cruise speed Mach 0.78. "I know this bird." Maria pulled off her cleaning gloves with the same precision she'd once used to remove flight gloves after 12-hour combat missions. "You need to get me to the cockpit. Now." Catherine hesitated. In that moment of doubt, Maria reached into her wallet and pulled out a small, worn card. Catherine's eyes widened as she read it. The Federal Aviation Administration logo was faded but unmistakable. Commercial pilot license. Multi-engine land. Instrument rating. The name read Maria C. Vasquez, but there was something else. A small notation that most civilians wouldn't recognize. Military competency endorsement. "How long since you've flown?" Catherine asked, already moving toward the cockpit. "Every night in my dreams," Maria answered, following close behind. "And 7 years, 4 months, 16 days in reality." The cockpit door loomed ahead. Behind it, Captain Morrison was slumped over the yoke, his breathing labored, the first officer unconscious in his seat. Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport was still 28 minutes away at normal cruise speed. The autopilot was engaged, but someone would need to land this plane. Maria paused at the threshold. The smell hit her first: aviation fuel, hydraulic fluid, that particular mixture of electronics and filtered air that existed nowhere else but in a cockpit. It pulled her backward through time, through 7 years of self-imposed exile, through the courts-martial that had cleared her name but destroyed her career, through the moments that had earned her a call sign she'd spent years trying to forget. "What do we call you?" Catherine asked, her hand on the intercom, ready to reassure 217 terrified passengers. Maria looked at the instruments glowing before her, each one familiar as her own reflection. The altitude indicator showed 35,000 feet. The artificial horizon was steady, but storms were building to the west. She could see the towering cumulonimbus on the weather radar, painted in angry reds and yellows. "Tell them," Maria paused, then straightened her shoulders beneath the faded blue uniform that marked her as just another invisible service worker. "Tell them Ghost is flying." Catherine's finger hesitated over the intercom button. "Ghost." "My call sign," Maria said, sliding into the captain's seat after Catherine and a male flight attendant had carefully moved Morrison to the galley. From back when the Air Force thought I was worth something. The control yoke felt alien and familiar simultaneously under her palms. Muscle memory began to surface, like code buried deep in her DNA. She scanned the instruments with the systematic precision that had once made her one of the Air Force's most decorated transport pilots. Airspeed, 450 knots. Heading, 87. Fuel, 11,000 pounds remaining. Everything normal except for the two unconscious pilots and the service worker now responsible for everyone's lives. Phoenix approach, this is. Maria hesitated, looking at the flight number painted on the center console. This is United 227 declaring an emergency. The response crackled through her headset immediately. United 227, Phoenix approach, state your emergency. Phoenix, we have pilot incapacitation. Both flight crew members are unconscious. I'm a passenger with previous flight experience, now at the controls. There was a pause, the kind that meant someone was hitting the alert button, calling supervisors, setting in motion a chain of events that would bring every available resource to bear. United 227, Phoenix approach, copy your emergency. Can you state your flight experience? Maria's thumb hovered over the transmit button. How did you compress 15 years of military aviation into a sentence? How did you explain that you'd flown everything from C-130 Hercules to C-17 Globemasters, that you'd landed on dirt strips in Afghanistan under fire, that you'd earned the Distinguished Flying Cross before it all came crashing down? Phoenix approach, I'm a former Air Force pilot. 7 years out of currency, but I know this aircraft type. Another pause, then, United 227 stand by. Stand by, Maria almost laughed, as if she had anywhere else to go at 35,000 feet with 217 souls depending on her remembering how to be the pilot she'd once been. She glanced at the fuel gauges again. The math was automatic. Current consumption rate, distance to Phoenix required reserves. They had fuel for one approach, maybe two if she was conservative. No room for errors. The storm cells to the west were moving faster than predicted. She could see them building, violent towers of convection that would tear an aircraft apart if she flew through them. Phoenix Sky Harbor's main runway would be experiencing severe crosswinds in about 20 minutes. The decisions she made in the next few moments would determine whether the morning news would report a miracle or a tragedy. United 227, Phoenix approach. We're clearing all traffic from your path. Descend and maintain flight level 280. Can you confirm you're able to control the aircraft? Control, such a simple word for such a complex dance of physics and judgment. Maria's left hand found the thrust levers while her right gripped the yoke. Phoenix, United 227, beginning descent to flight level 280. Aircraft is under positive control. But even as she said it, she felt the tremor in her hands, not from fear, but from memory. The last time she declared positive control of an aircraft, she'd been over Kandahar province, making a decision that would save 38 lives and end her career. The investigation had eventually vindicated her, proved that she'd made the only choice possible under the circumstances. But vindication didn't restore wings. It didn't erase the 2 years of hearings, the accusations of cowardice that had preceded the truth. Now, 7 years later, wearing a janitor's uniform instead of a flight suit, she was back in the left seat. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. Ladies and gentlemen, Catherine's voice filled the cabin behind her. This is your lead flight attendant. We have a qualified pilot at the controls and will be landing in Phoenix shortly. Please ensure your seatbelts are securely fastened. Qualified. Maria wondered what the passengers would think if they knew their qualified pilot had spent the last 7 years pushing mop buckets through the same planes she used to fly. If they knew that Ghost had gotten her call sign not because she was stealthy, but because after Kandahar, she'd become invisible, A ghost in the aviation world, someone whose name was whispered but never spoken aloud. The autopilot disconnect warning chimed as Maria took manual control. The 737 responded immediately, and for a moment, the years fell away. This was what she'd been born to do, what her hands had been shaped for. Every switch, every gauge, every subtle vibration through the airframe told her something. The aircraft was speaking to her in a language she'd never truly forgotten. United 227, turn left heading 060, descend and maintain 16,000. Left to 060, descending to 16,000, United 227. The weather radar painted an ugly picture. The storm cells had merged into a line, stretching across their approach path like a barrier. Going around them would burn fuel they didn't have. Going through them in a 737 full of passengers was unthinkable. That left one option: finding a gap, threading the needle between cells in what pilots called picking your way through. Maria had picked her way through worse. Over the Hindu Kush mountains with engines failing, through sandstorms in Iraq that turned day into night, through the political storm that followed Kandahar, when everyone wanted someone to blame for an impossible situation. "How are you doing?" Catherine asked quietly, having returned to check on her. "Like riding a bicycle," Maria replied, then added, "if the bicycle weighs 90,000 pounds and is traveling at 400 miles per hour. Catherine managed a nervous laugh. "The passengers. Don't tell them about the storms yet. Let them think this is routine for another few minutes." But nothing about this was routine. Maria could feel the aircraft's center of gravity shifting as passengers moved around despite the seatbelt sign. The fuel burn was asymmetric, the left tank feeding faster than the right. Small things that could become big things if not managed properly. She reached for the fuel panel, fingers dancing across switches she hadn't touched in 7 years, cross-feeding fuel to balance the load. "Ghost 11, this is Hammer 63, how copy?" The voice in her headset wasn't from Phoenix Approach. It was military frequency cutting through on guard, the emergency channel all aircraft monitored. Maria's blood chilled. She recognized the call sign format: Air Force. "Station calling on guard. This is United 227. Ghost 11, we know who you are. Colonel Rodriguez sends his regards. We're flying escort 2 F-16s off your left wing. We'll help guide you through the weather." Maria looked left and saw them. 2 Vipers in perfect formation, their gray hulls almost invisible against the storm clouds. Rodriguez, her old wing commander, the one who'd stood by her during the investigation, who'd fought to save her career even when it became impossible. "I'm not Ghost 11 anymore," she transmitted. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you'll always be Ghost 11 to us. We've got real-time weather data. There's a gap in the line, bearing 045, approximately 8 miles wide. It'll be tight, but it's your best shot." A gap 8 miles wide at altitude meant maybe 4 miles at approach level once the winds got involved. Threading a 737 through that would require precision flying, the kind that separated good pilots from great ones. The kind that had once made her legendary in transport squadrons, before Kandahar, before the choices that had saved lives but cost everything else. Phoenix Approach, United 227 requesting deviation heading 045 for weather. United 227, deviation approved. Be advised, severe turbulence reported in that area. Severe turbulence. Maria had once flown through severe turbulence for 3 hours straight over Afghanistan, keeping her aircraft steady while Special Forces operators fast-roped onto a mountainside. She'd earned an Air Medal for that mission. The medal was in a box somewhere, along with the rest of her former life. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced over the passenger address system, surprising herself by speaking directly to them. "This is your acting pilot. We're going to experience some turbulence in the next few minutes as we navigate around weather. It will be uncomfortable, but we will get through it safely. Flight attendants, secure the cabin immediately. She could hear the rushed movements behind her, the click of seat belts, the nervous murmur of prayers in multiple languages. 217 people who didn't know that their lives now depended on muscle memory and instincts 7 years dormant. The first turbulence hit like a sledgehammer. The 737 dropped 200 feet in an instant, then slammed upward, triggering screams from the cabin. Maria's hands moved without conscious thought, adjusting trim, managing power, feeling for that sweet spot where the aircraft would ride the chaos instead of fighting it. Ghost 11 Hammer 63, gap is bearing 043 now, winds are pushing it south. She could see it on the radar, a narrow corridor of yellow and green between walls of red. The F-16s had accelerated ahead, marking the path like shepherds guiding the flock. This was why she'd loved military aviation, this brotherhood that transcended rank and time. Even after 7 years, they remembered Ghost. The 737 bucked again, harder this time. A bang from the cabin, something had come loose. The engine parameters flickered but held steady. General Electric CFM56 engines, reliable as sunrise, built to take punishment. She'd have to write a thank you letter to the engineers, assuming she lived to send it. Altitude deviation, the computer announced. They dropped another 500 feet in turbulence. Phoenix, United 227, unable to maintain altitude. Requesting block altitude 15 to 17,000. United 227, block altitude approved. Emergency vehicles are standing by. Standing by. Maria wondered what they expected to find. A miracle or debris scattered across the desert. She thought about the mop bucket she'd left in the galley, about the 7 years of cleaning planes while pretending she didn't miss flying them, about the nightmares that weren't about crashes but about being grounded, earthbound, forgotten. The gap was ahead now, visible through the windscreen as a lighter patch between towers of black. The F-16s had already punched through, their afterburners leaving contrails that marked the path like runway lights in the sky. Maria pushed the thrust levers forward slightly, building energy for what was coming. This was the moment that separated pilots from passengers with licenses. Reading the weather, feeling the aircraft, understanding that sometimes you had to fly toward the danger to find safety on the other side. In Kandahar, she'd flown toward a mountainside that everyone said was impossible to clear with a damaged aircraft. She'd made it by 7 feet, saving everyone on board but destroying her landing gear in the process. The investigation had taken 2 years to admit she'd been right. Entering the gap now, she announced, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to Phoenix Approach, the F-16s, or herself. The turbulence intensified immediately. The control yoke tried to tear itself from her hands. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to find another way, but there was no other way. There was only through. Severe turbulence, maintain heading. One of the F-16 pilots called out, "You're doing great, Ghost, just like old times." Old times. When she'd been Major Maria Vasquez, not Maria the cleaning lady. When her call sign had meant something more than a painful reminder. When she'd worn wings on her chest instead of a name tag that said Custodial Services. The 737 rolled hard right, approaching the certificated limit. Maria countered with left aileron and rudder, her feet dancing on the pedals like a pianist working pedals on a Steinway. The aircraft fought her, wanted to surrender to the storm, but she wouldn't let it. Not this time. This time, she would not be grounded. Then suddenly, like breaking through a wall, they were in clear air. The turbulence stopped so abruptly that the silence felt loud. Ahead, Phoenix sprawled across the desert, the runway lights of Sky Harbor already visible in the afternoon haze. United 227, Phoenix Approach, you're through the weather. Descend and maintain 8,000. Turn left heading 270 for vectors to final approach, runway 26. Left to 270, descending to 8,000, United 227. Her hands were steady now. The hardest part was over, or so the passengers would think. But Maria knew better. Landing was where most accidents happened. Landing was where fatigue and adrenaline crashdown met unforgiving physics. Landing was where 7 years of rust would show itself. Ghost 11 Hammer flight is going to orbit overhead. Just wanted to say, we remember Kandahar. Everyone knows you got screwed. It's good to hear you on frequency again. Maria's throat tightened. Thanks, Hammer. Now get off this frequency before someone asks questions. The F-16s peeled away, climbing back toward the storm to help other aircraft navigate through. Maria was alone again with her 737 and the approaching runway. The automation was all there: instrument landing system, autopilot, auto throttles. She could couple everything and let the computers land the plane. That's what a smart pilot would do after 7 years away. But Ghost had never been smart. Ghost had been good. United 227, turn left heading 240, descend and maintain 6,000, cleared ILS approach runway 26. Left to 240, down to 6,000, cleared ILS 26, United 227. She could see the runway now, a strip of concrete that looked impossibly narrow from this distance. The wind sock showed gusting crosswinds, maybe 20 knots, within limits but not comfortable. Nothing about this was comfortable. Catherine, Maria called back. Make sure everyone is locked down tight. This might be bumpy. The flight attendant appeared in the doorway. The captain is conscious. He wants to know, she paused, seeing something in Maria's face. He wants to know who you really are. Tell him I'm nobody, just someone who used to fly. But that wasn't true, was it? She wasn't nobody. She was Ghost 11, the pilot who'd made the impossible landing in Kandahar, who'd saved 38 special operators by threading a damaged C-17 through a gap barely wider than the wingspan, who'd been court-martialed for violating direct orders, then exonerated when the truth came out, that following those orders would have meant leaving American soldiers to die. 5,000 feet, she announced to herself, pulling the power back slightly. The 737 was talking to her now, telling her through subtle vibrations that it was configured wrong. The fuel imbalance had returned. She'd been so focused on the weather that she'd missed it. Quick calculation. They had enough for one approach. If she had to go around, if she missed this landing, they'd be declaring a fuel emergency. United 227, contact tower on 118.7. Over to tower, United 227. She switched frequencies with one hand while adjusting trim with the other. Every movement was becoming more natural, the 7-year gap closing with each passing second. United 227, Phoenix Tower, winds 220 at 18 gusting 25, runway 26, cleared to land. Emergency vehicles are standing by. Standing by. There it was again, that phrase that meant everyone was expecting drama. Maria could see them lined up beside the runway, fire trucks, ambulances, the incident commander's vehicle, all waiting to see if the janitor could land the plane. Gear down, she said aloud, reaching for the landing gear lever. The familiar rumble and thump confirmed 3 green lights, gear down and locked. She began configuring for landing. Flaps 15, speed brake armed, auto brake set to 3. Each action was a link in a chain that stretched back through time, through every landing she'd ever made, military and civilian, routine and emergency. 4,000 feet. The passengers had gone silent. That peculiar quiet that descended when everyone knew something significant was happening. Maria wondered if they could feel it. The shift in energy as she transformed from someone who used to fly to someone who was flying. Flaps 25. The 737 slowed, its nose rising slightly as the flaps extended. The winds were worse than reported, gusting across the runway at an angle that would require constant correction. Maria's feet were already moving. her hands making micro-adjustments that kept the aircraft aligned with the runway centerline. Ghost 11, the military frequency crackled to life again. I know you're busy, but this is Colonel Rodriguez. Just wanted to say you belong in that seat. You always have. Maria couldn't respond. Rodriguez had risked his own career defending her during the investigation. He'd been the only senior officer willing to say publicly that she'd made the right call in Kandahar, that regulations sometimes had to bend when lives were at stake. 3,000 feet, flaps 30. The 737 was fully configured now, gear down, flaps extended on speed on glide path. Everything looked perfect except for the crosswind that kept trying to push them off centerline. Maria fed in right rudder, left aileron, creating a slip that would keep them aligned. It was athletic flying, the kind that couldn't be taught in simulators. 1,000 feet, the automated voice announced. Minimums. Decision height. The point where she had to commit to landing or execute a go-around. The runway was clear ahead, the precision approach path indicators showing 2 red, 2 white, on glide path. But the winds were creating a situation that would challenge even a current pilot. 500 feet. She could see the threshold now, the touchdown zone markers, the beautiful, blessed concrete that would bring this odyssey to an end. Her hands were moving constantly, playing the winds like a conductor directing an unruly orchestra. 100 feet. 50. 30. At 20 feet, a massive gust slammed into them from the left. The 737 rolled hard, the left wing dipping toward the runway. Maria's response was instant, full right aileron, left rudder, a burst of power to arrest the sink. The aircraft leveled just as the main gear kissed the concrete. The touchdown was soft, professional, the kind that would make passengers wonder if they'd actually landed. Maria pulled the thrust levers to idle, then into reverse. The speed brake deployed automatically. The auto brakes engaged. The 737 tracked straight down the centerline despite the crosswind, as if it knew it was finally in capable hands. As they decelerated through 80 knots, Maria heard something she'd never heard in her 15 years of military flying or her brief civilian career. Applause from the cabin. Not polite clapping, but thunderous, emotional applause mixed with crying and cheering. United 227, Phoenix Tower, turn right when able, taxi to gate Bravo 7. The emergency vehicles will follow you. Right turn when able, Bravo 7, United 227. As she turned off the runway, Maria saw them. Hundreds of people lined up on the observation decks, on the terminal roof, ground crews standing on their vehicles. All watching, all witnessing something that would become aviation legend. The day a janitor saved Flight 227. But she wasn't thinking about that. She was thinking about the investigation that would follow, the questions about why someone with her qualifications was cleaning planes instead of flying them. The media attention that would drag up Kandahar again, force her to relive the mission that had defined and destroyed her career. Ghost 11 Hammer Flight. We're headed home but wanted to say, welcome back to the sky. The F-16s passed overhead one last time, their wings waggling in salute. Maria watched them disappear into the blue, heading back to Davis Monthan or Luke, back to the world she'd been expelled from 7 years ago. The taxi to the gate took forever and no time at all. Fire trucks and ambulances flanked them like an honor guard. Maria could see news vans racing along the perimeter road. Someone had leaked the story. Former military pilot saves passenger jet. By evening, her face would be on every screen in America. Maria, Catherine said softly, the captain wants to speak to you. Captain Morrison, supported by 2 paramedics, appeared in the cockpit doorway. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear. I've been flying for 30 years, he said. That was the best crosswind landing I've ever seen. Just lucky, Maria replied. already reaching for the engine shutdown checklist. "No," Morrison said firmly. "That wasn't luck, that was skill. Who are you?" Maria finished the shutdown flow, fuel pumps off, electrical systems to ground power, parking brake set. When she finally turned to face him, 7 years of hidden identity fell away. Major Maria Vasquez, United States Air Force, retired. Call sign Ghost 11. Morrison's eyes widened. "Kandahar, you're the one who—" "Yeah," Maria interrupted, "I'm the one." Through the cockpit windows, she could see the jet bridge approaching. In minutes, the passengers would deplane, each one wanting to thank the hero pilot. The media would demand interviews. The FAA would want statements. United Airlines would want to know why someone with her qualifications was mopping their planes instead of flying them. But first, there was this moment. Sitting in the left seat of a 737, engines winding down, the smell of jet fuel and heated metal filling her nostrils. For 7 years, she dreamed of this, and nightmares weren't about what had happened in Kandahar but about never flying again. "Ladies and gentlemen," Catherine's voice came over the public address. "We're at the gate. On behalf of Captain Morrison, First Officer Stevens, and especially our acting pilot, Major Maria Vasquez, welcome to Phoenix." The use of her rank was deliberate, respectful. Maria felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking but opening, like a door that had been sealed for 7 years finally swinging wide. As she stood to leave the cockpit, she noticed something. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. For the first time since Kandahar, since the investigation, since the day they'd taken her wings, her hands were perfectly steady. "Major," Captain Morrison called out as she reached the cockpit door, "what will you do now?" Maria turned back, seeing herself reflected in the windscreen. Not the janitor who'd boarded in Lowe's Angels, but the pilot she'd always been. "I think," she said slowly, "I'm going to stop being a ghost." The passenger cabin erupted as she emerged. 217 people on their feet, applauding, crying, reaching out to touch her as she passed. Maria moved through them in a daze, her custodial uniform incongruous among the grateful faces. Near the back, she saw a young girl, maybe 12, wearing plastic pilot wings the flight attendants gave to children. "Are you really a pilot?" the girl asked. Maria knelt down, her knees protesting after the adrenaline drain. "What do you think?" "I think you're a superhero disguised as a janitor." "No," Maria said softly, "just someone who remembered how to fly." The jet bridge was chaos. Airport security, airline officials, paramedics, all trying to establish some kind of order. Maria pushed through them, desperate for air, for space, for a moment to process what had just happened. She found herself in an empty gate area, the windows overlooking the 737 she'd just landed. Ground crew swarmed around it, beginning their inspection. In a few hours after maintenance cleared it, the aircraft would fly again as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But something had happened. Not just the emergency landing, but something deeper. "Major Vasquez." She turned to find a man in a TSA uniform, but his bearing was military. The kind of posture that came from years of standing at attention. "Senior Airman Thompson," he said, saluting. "Former Air Force, separated last year. I was in the 436th when you flew through that storm to evacuate our wounded. You saved my best friend's life." Maria didn't know what to say. For 7 years she'd been invisible, unknown, forgotten. Now, suddenly, everyone seemed to remember. "The media wants a statement," Thompson continued. "But I can get you out the back if you want. I know what it's like when you're not ready for the spotlight." "No," Maria heard herself say. "No more hiding." Thompson nodded, understanding. "There's a conference room in Terminal 4. They're setting up for a press briefing. United Airlines CEO is flying in. The Air Force Chief of Staff wants to speak with you. And," he paused, "someone leaked the Kandahar files. The real ones. The ones that show what actually happened." The Kandahar files. classified for 7 years, protecting those who'd made the wrong call, who'd ordered her to abandon American troops to preserve political relationships. She'd violated those orders, saved those troops, and been court-martialed for it. The investigation had eventually cleared her, but the damage was done. Her career was over, her reputation destroyed by rumors and half-truths. Who leaked them? Someone who thinks it's time for the truth, Thompson said. Someone who thinks Ghost 11 deserves better than pushing a mop. Maria walked to the window, watching the afternoon sun paint the desert mountains gold. 7 years ago, she'd made a choice in skis not unlike these. She'd chosen lives over career, right over regulation, honor over obedience. It had cost her everything. "You know what the funny thing is," she said to Thompson. "I was good at being invisible. No one looks at the cleaning crew. No one asks questions. It was peaceful." "But you weren't born for peaceful," Thompson replied. "You were born to fly." A commotion in the terminal caught their attention. Passengers from Flight 227 had refused to leave, gathering instead in the gate area. Someone had started a chant, "Ghost, Ghost, Ghost." Others held up phones, streaming live, telling the world about the janitor who'd saved them. "They're calling you a hero," Thompson observed. "I'm not a hero, I just remembered my training." "Major, with all due respect, that's exactly what heroes say." Maria's phone, the ancient flip phone she'd carried for 7 years, began ringing. She didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. "Major Vasquez, this is General Patricia Hayes, Air Force Chief of Staff. I'm en route to Phoenix now. We need to talk about your future." "I don't have a future with the Air Force, General. That was made very clear 7 years ago." "Things change, Major. The truth about Kandahar is finally out. The officers who railroaded you are facing consequences. And after what you did today, Maria, we need pilots like you. We never should have let you go." Maria wanted to laugh, or cry, or both. 7 years of exile ended by food poisoning and bad weather. "I'm 43 years old, General. I've been out of the cockpit for 7 years." "You just landed a 737 in a crosswind after flying through a level 5 thunderstorm. I think you're current enough. Besides, we're not talking about putting you back in a C-17. We're talking about something else, training the next generation, teaching them that sometimes the right choice isn't in the manual." "I need to think about it." "Of course, but Maria, Ghost, you belong in the sky. Today proved that." The call ended, leaving Maria standing at the window, watching the controlled chaos of airport operations. Fuel trucks, baggage carts, pushback tugs, all performing their choreographed dance. For 7 years, she'd been part of that ground-level ballet, invisible but essential. "Major Vasquez." She turned to find the young girl from the plane, still wearing her plastic wings, now accompanied by her parents. "We just wanted to say thank you," the mother said, tears streaming down her face. "You saved our baby." "I did my job," Maria replied automatically. "No," the father said firmly. "You did much more than that. Our daughter wants to be a pilot now, because of you, because she saw that heroes don't always wear capes or uniforms. Sometimes they wear whatever they have and step up when needed." The girl held out her plastic wings. "Would you sign these?" Maria took the wings, such cheap plastic things, nothing like the real wings she'd worn. But in the child's eyes they were everything. She found a pen and signed them. "Major Maria Ghost Vasquez, never stop flying." As she handed them back, she noticed something else. Captain Morrison, supported by a wheelchair but conscious, being wheeled through the terminal. He saw her and raised his hand in a salute. Not a military salute, but something deeper, recognition from one pilot to another. The media had found her now. Cameras, microphones, reporters shouting questions. Maria stood straighter, squaring her shoulders the way she had before every mission briefing. This was just another kind of turbulence to navigate. "Major Vasquez, how does it feel to be a hero?" Major, why were you working as a janitor? Can you tell us about Kandahar? She held up her hand, and surprisingly they quieted. 7 years ago, I made a decision that ended my military career but saved 38 lives. I was court-martialed, investigated, and eventually exonerated, but the damage was done. I lost my wings, my identity, my purpose. I became invisible because that was easier than facing what I'd lost. She paused, looking at the cameras, knowing that somewhere, the officers who destroyed her career were watching. Today, I was just trying to clean a plane. That's been my job for 7 years, making sure you fly in clean, safe aircraft. But when I was needed, when there was no one else, I remembered who I used to be. Who I still am, apparently. What will you do now? Someone shouted. Maria thought about General Hayes's offer, about training new pilots, about returning to the sky. She thought about 7 years of mop buck,